Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Govs on the Go Faculty Spotlight, a podcast featuring faculty in the College of Arts and Letters here at Austin Peay State University. My name is Dr. Buzz Hoon. I'm the Dean of the College. I'm also the host of the podcast. And today we have a special guest from the Department of Art and Design, Billy Renkl. And Billy, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Buzz. Thanks for having me here.
Well, we always like to begin at the beginning for some reason, and part of that is talking about your journey on getting to Austin Peay. Can you tell us how you got to be a professor here at Austin Peay?
Sure. I had never heard of Austin Peay when I interviewed for the position. I went to two very big schools, and I assumed I wanted to teach at a school like that. And I came to Austin Peay to get a couple of years experience, so I was sort of more marketable. And 35 years later, I've never applied for another job. It turns out I was wrong about where I wanted to teach, and where I wanted to teach was right here. And I fell in love with a colleague. I fell in love with a colleague at the interview.
Wow.
Though I was playing a long game, and we didn't marry for 7 years, but we've both been very happy.
That's like a story from The Office, where you just played that very slow game there.
Yes.
Okay, and the person that you married was Susan Bryant, who, of course, a wonderful photographer, accomplished photographer, also professor emeritus, and so many people know of her and know of you as well. But I'm interested to learn what you learned from her as a teacher and also as an artist.
I've learned so much from her as an artist. I tell my students all the time, like, the big surprise when you graduate is that suddenly, nobody really wants to talk to you about your work. They'll tell it's good, but nobody really wants to chew on it with you. And it is invaluable to be married to somebody as clear and articulate and insightful and talented as Susan. I always say I was an artist before I met Susan, but I wasn't a colorist until after I met Susan. She is especially brilliant at color, and she taught me so much more than I learned in graduate school or undergraduate school.
That's awesome. And it says something about the ability for her to provide feedback to you in a safe environment that you can take that and improve on your own work.
Yes. We always have something to talk about.
Well, we're going to talk next about some of your favorite classes that you teach, and you teach drawing classes, illustration. Can you talk a little bit about what are some of your favorite classes to teach?
I can't really answer that because I don't teach a class I don't love. I teach 3 levels of illustration, and I often teach the intermediate and the advanced drawing, not every time. And then my colleagues have been gracious enough to let me teach a course in collage, which is the medium I work in, and the commercial work I do for clients is always collage. I don't know of any other university that teaches a course that's focused on collage, so I feel really fortunate about that. But I love all of them. There's not one I don't love.
Well, then let me reframe that and ask you about, because I'm sure you have taught students from their very first class that they get here to the last class that they may take. So, do you like to see that sort of development over the years? The fact that you see somebody that comes in and really has applied some of the things that you've talked about in class?
I no longer teach freshman level classes. I have, but I teach 1 sophomore level class, and the rest are junior and senior level. We're a tight enough department with a fluid enough sense. None of us own any student, so I'm aware of students' work at the freshman level because I see it in the hallway, even if they haven't been my students. And yes, that's super gratifying. A lot of our students went to either underfunded high school art programs, or maybe they didn't have an art program at their high school. And so they really are sort of blank slates, and that's incredibly gratifying. Yeah.
And the fact that within that Department of Art and Design, you have here especially within that building, you have such a support for all of the students. It's just a wonderful to be, I'm sure, part of that group that lifts up the entire student body, as you said, even though they may go into different concentrations.
Right.
They all have an opportunity to have input from a group of faculty that really care about their development.
Right, I'm teaching an intermediate illustration class, and there are studio artists and animators and graphic designers in that class. And they work very differently, but they're all, like, they're feeding off each other and introducing ideas to each other from their various concentrations. And I think that's the strength of our department when that happens.
We're going to move into your professional work, and I'm just going to use a quote. I will tell you, I talked to the chair. McLean gave me some information a little bit. You are a collector of paper ephemera, often vintage paper, that you find another purpose for by making collages, you had mentioned. So how did you kind of come into that medium?
When I was an undergraduate, I had one of those pivotal moments. I was taking art history and anatomy and physiology at the same time, and I was struck by how the students in my anatomy and physiology class looked at the images in the textbook differently than the art students looked at the images in the art history textbook. And in some ways, the people taking the science class looked with more fervor, trying to understand something that was complicated. And I became interested in the, how different groups use images differently, and that scientific images have some authority that art sometimes lacks. So anyway, I started making collages out of scientific images to explore that thought. And I would use those as a sketching tool for a drawing. And on a trip to Switzerland, where I was living in a tiny town and no one spoke English, it took going to Switzerland to realize I could stop making the drawings and just make the collages, that they were more interesting. And that was 1993, and that's all I've done since then.
So does it matter what the age is or what the subject is?
The only time it matters is I also do collage work for clients, and copyright's always an issue when something is done for clients. And some clients are skittish about it. I just finished a book of 52 collages, and they wanted absolute certainty that nothing was published before 1926. So I have to have a lot of vintage paper on hand for that. When I work for other clients, like the New York Times, they don't care. I can use anything they want. I'm assuming they maybe have an army of lawyers who can defend that choice. So it really depends on the client. But because of being conscious of potential copyright violation, the work for hire is almost always very old paper.
So when you're dealing with that vintage antique paper, do you ever say to yourself, there's a limited amount that might be available here, so you have to know what you're doing? I don't ever say that, because there's always something else, even if I wreck that thing. And I do think of art materials as being sort of like a well. You should use them all the time, because more will show up. But I am, sometimes I'll order something, I'll see it on eBay and I think it would be great in a collage, and I order it and it comes and it's just too nice for me to cut up. And I'm like, oh, drat. And, because then what am I going to do with it? Normally I find somebody who would value it as it is, intact, and give it to them. Because there are limits to what I'll cut up. That's interesting. Now, you mentioned that you went to Switzerland. You have been, you've exhibited across the United States, but you've also traveled. What are some of your favorite memories of that you can share about your work and where you've been? So there have been a couple of cities that themselves seem vibrant in the moment, even though they're very old cities. Rome is one, and Istanbul is one. Mexico City was that way. There are old cities like Florence that seem sort of on tourist life support, nothing. But those first cities, like Istanbul, is its own place in the moment, even though you are walking down streets that have existed for 1,500 years. And those are the cities that I love, where
the present and its vitality is layered on to the beauty of the past.
Now, you mentioned also having the opportunity to work with clients over the years, and certainly there's the production of art that you want to make, and then there's the production of art that somebody else is saying, I will pay you to make. So what are the positives and negatives of both doing client work as opposed to what you produce on your own?
You know, the only negative sometimes of working with clients is that digital illustration is so ubiquitous that it's hard for them to grasp like what it means to make a physical analog collage. Like they'll say, we like this, but could you like make that element blue? And I'll say, I can't, because that element's not blue. Or can you make this bigger? And I'm like, nope, that's the size it is. And but that doesn't happen much, because most people, when they hire me, they're hiring me because it looks handmade. They're looking for an alternative to something that has the slickness of digital production. I am interested in, I trained as an illustrator as an undergraduate, and then my MFA's in drawing, but I'm interested in like what it means to like find a visual equivalent for an idea that's embedded in a text. And that's really what illustration does. And I don't care if that idea is mine or if that text is mine. I mean, I have ideas that I want to make an image in response to, but if, the book I just illustrated was written by my sister, Margaret Renkl, and I was just as eager to read through her words and try to find a visual analog for that. The process is interesting. It doesn't matter where the idea comes from.
I think so many of our professors within the College of Arts and Letters are, and you and I just kind of briefly talked about this before we went on, are storytellers.
Yeah.
And do you see yourself as a storyteller, and have you seen your development as a storyteller?
Well, I'm from Alabama, and we traffic in stories in Alabama. So yes, I come from a long line of storytellers. One of the genius of my education at Auburn University was that the faculty encouraged me in like true humanities fashion to be interested in my other classes and bring them back to the art department into my illustration classes. And those were stories, whether they were stories about what happens in the Krebs cycle in biology, or like what happened in the fall of Constantinople, or in history class. Like those, the story element is what I was always interested into, even outside of English class. And I'm always trying to find a way for that to be part of my studio practice.
Well, hopefully we've been able to piece together enough of an interview today. We're going to do a little pun here at the end of the interview there, Billy. So we appreciate you being on the podcast today.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
And thanks to our viewers and listeners out there for joining us. We will continue to profile some of the outstanding professors we have in the College of Arts and Letters here at Austin Peay State University. So until next time, stay safe, take care, and God bless.